Well, hi everybody, and welcome back to another episode in The Road to Somewhere. I know that different people watch the videos at a lot of different times, but for those of you that are actually watching it today while we're filming it, it is Monday, it's Labor Day, so for you few that might be watching it today, happy Labor Day, and of course, Baker and I are laboring today on Labor Day, where you're not supposed to labor, but we wanted to make sure we got this episode out to you on today. So anyway, we are in what we're calling Season 3 of The Road to Somewhere, and it's kind of the third leg on our journey, both down Route 66 and through the Bible. And we're in the state of Kansas, as you might remember, and we're in the section of the Bible called Poetry. Our book that is sort of hooked up with our stop today is going to be the book of Proverbs, and the theme of Proverbs is really wisdom. So we'll be talking a little bit about wisdom today. You know, I have to tell you that and this is not political, might have political ramifications, but I just want to say one of the things that the book of Proverbs does, and what biblical wisdom is that it helps us identify the characteristics of a wise man or woman and a foolish man or woman. So you've got the wise man and you have the fool. And you know, I feel like we live in a world where we have a lot of fools in positions of power, and that decisions are made that, you know, you might not agree with me, it's okay, but just seem foolish to me. You know, 12.5 million illegal immigrants being let into the country. I understand that we've always been a nation of immigrants, and we've tried to be open to people that legally want to come into our nation. But to me, that 12.5 million illegal immigrants, it just seems foolish. We live in a nation that currently has $35 trillion of debt. And one of the things that Proverbs is going to talk about is going to talk a little bit about money. But the government has spent for years now more than it's taken in, to the point where now just the interest on our debt is approaching what is the gross domestic product of our nation. So we're simply paying interest, not even knocking down that debt. And to me, that seems foolish. We live in a country where young children are getting gender-altering drugs and irreversible surgeries without parental consent in many cases. And again, regardless of how you feel about that particular issue, that just seems foolish to me. Men that have decided that they want to be women are competing against women in sports and given access to women's locker rooms and showers, and it just seems foolish to me. I was reading that in the last year, 23 national and international championships in women's sports have been won by transgender women, and it just seems a little bit crazy. We live in a country where American college students are protesting, and again, the issue that they're protesting, oftentimes I understand, and protesting is not the problem so much as they're protesting with shouts and signs that say "Death to America." You know, it just seems foolish to me. So again, we are desperate, I think, for some wisdom and for some leadership that is wise and not foolish. And in the Bible, we have 31 chapters of wise instruction in what's called the book of Proverbs, and that will be the book we're going to look at a little bit in our next stop, and there's a much more extensive lecture on it in the longer video that you have a link to. So again, we've left Riverton. We're driving down Route 66, and from Riverton we're coming over here to what is actually called Rainbow Bridge. And this is one of the places we're stopping simply because we need to make 5 stops in the state of Kansas. And this particular bridge is, well, it's kind of special. It's the only what is called a marsh arch bridge that's left in the state of Kansas. And it's pretty cool. This is what the bridge looks like. It's just a single span bridge. In this case, it crosses what's called Brush Creek in that area of Kansas. Most of these have just deteriorated to the point where they were knocked down and other bridges were built, and that's why this is a bit of a classic. It actually also, like in our last session, Eisler's store was on the National Record of Historic Places. This bridge is on that same National Record of Historic, or Register for Historic Places. And a couple of years ago, it was restored and renovated. And it's kind of cool because one of the things they did is right in the middle of the road on the bridge, they painted a Route 66 sign. So this is our stop, and in the video, what happens is that Joy has John pull the Corvette kind of right up where the front of the Corvette is, right by this Route 66 sign on the bridge, and has him just sit kind of on the front fender of the Corvette as they shoot the video. In the video, John explains how they are just a short way down Route 66 from where they were on our last episode, and that this is on the way to the next kind of larger stop in Baxter Springs, Kansas, which was on the stretch of Route 66. Right here is where it kind of turns south towards Oklahoma. And he explains a little bit about the marsh arch kind of bridge, this simple span. Explains that this one's been named Rainbow Bridge. Just gives them a little bit of background on the bridge itself, and reminds them again that, that they're making 5 stops on this little stretch, and that's part of the reason that instead of being in a town, they've decided to stop here at Rainbow Bridge. He pretty rapidly transitions then into the corresponding book of the Bible that is paired with this stop. And as I've said before, this is the book of Proverbs. He tells his audience a little bit about Proverbs, talks about how it's part not only of poetry, but is part of what in the Jewish culture was called wisdom literature. The book authorship is attributed in the beginning to Solomon, although along the way through the book there are times where we're told that there were other authors also. When we talked about Psalms, we talked a little bit about how many songs must have been written over that 500-year period, and taking all of those songs and then sort of, looking for the best and coming up with a collection which were God's greatest hits. You might think of Proverbs perhaps as Solomon's greatest hits, simply because back in the book of 1 Kings, we were told that Solomon wrote 3,000 Proverbs. The book of Proverbs, actually, it has 915 verses. in those 31 chapters, mostly short, pithy little statements about wise living, although there are some portions of the book that kind of are a longer story. The last proverb that talks about a good wife, the entire chapter is really one long proverb, but he tells the story about how Solomon became the wisest man in the world. You might remember that from when we were back in the book of 1 Kings. Remember that God was pleased with Solomon, and this is right before they build the temple, and God comes to Solomon and asks, what do you want me to do for you? Amazing, opportunity for Solomon. And Solomon answers, what I'd really like is a wise and discerning heart, that I might be able to rule this great people of yours. And God was pleased with that request, and he really made Solomon the wisest man in the world at that period of time. And because Solomon didn't ask for riches and long life, God said, along with wisdom, I'm going to give you riches and long life. So what we have here are some, very brief statements about the difference overall. Now there are different kind of subcategories, but overall, the book is distinguishing the characteristics between a wise person and a foolish person, and most of it written by someone who was, at the time, the wisest man in the world. So this is a book we should pay attention to. It's extremely practical. It gives a lot of practical advice. It gives advice on, John kind of tells them on avoiding foolish behavior. It gives a lot of tips on wise behavior on really the big issues of life. And oftentimes what happens is it will contrast what is a wise action in some specific situation to what is a foolish action. And so you might have in contrast in one proverb a wise behavior versus foolish behavior. It talks about marriage. For instance, again, Psalm 31 talks about, what does a good wife look like? And other parts of the book talk about the relationship between a man and a wife. Has a lot of instruction on parenting, how if you don't properly discipline a child, that they will tend to grow up to be foolish or naive. And so it deals with parenting. Talks about work and contrasts diligent work with the person that they refer to as the sluggard, and how that being a sluggard or lazy leads to poverty, whereas diligent labor leads to wealth and riches. So it just covers all kinds of relationships, and again, it's a very important book, and the longer lecture is quite important, where I'll go into quite a bit more detail in some of these different areas and give you some examples. One of the things that John does, and this is something that I've taught through the years also, is he really gives a plan for reading the book of Proverbs. One of the things that's kind of cool about it is there's 31 chapters, and of course most months have 30 to 31 days in them, and you can read through the book of Proverbs really in a month simply by taking whatever the date is. And so for instance, today, as we're shooting this, it's September 2nd, so it's the second day of the month, and so you would be reading the second chapter of Proverbs, and then tomorrow on the 3rd you'd read the 3rd chapter. So if you simply take the day of the month and read the chapter that's numbered in that same way, you can read through the book of Proverbs in a month. It takes a lifetime to absorb it. And again, having read it through just to get a big general idea of it, you'll want to go back and kind of, as you read through a chapter, when a verse really hits you, stop and reflect on it, because that could be the Holy Spirit really, trying to speak to something in your life that you need to pay attention to. So John kind of explains all this to them, and of course then, as is always the case, he encourages them to watch the teaching video on the book of Proverbs. And then while they're, shooting, Joy has John get back in the Corvette and actually drive across the bridge, and she shoots him driving across the bridge. And then as he comes to the other side of the bridge, she jumps in the car, and they head for their next location in the state of Kansas, which will be the little town of Baxter Springs. And it will be paired with the fascinating poetic book of Ecclesiastes. And you probably know Ecclesiastes from its famous statement, "Vanity, vanity, all is vanity." Although the New International Version captures really the meaning of the words there a little clearer when it has Solomon repeat numerous times, "Meaningless, meaningless, all is meaningless." So is life meaningless? Is that what the Bible is trying to tell us, or is it actually trying to give us, again, some hints about the things that are really important, and how pouring our lives into the things that oftentimes our culture tells us are most important ends up giving us a life that really is meaningless. So next time, again, Baxter Springs, the book of Ecclesiastes. That's where we'll pick up next week. And again, hope you have a great Labor Day. This was a pretty short little video, but again, hopefully you will take the time to watch the longer lecture on the book of Proverbs. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.